The jungle was quiet, too quiet. The air was heavy with the smell of damp soil and strange flowers. Thick vines hung from the twisted trees. And every shadow seemed alive. Liara moved carefully through the dense path, her silver eyes scanning the ground. She had been trained to notice danger, to read the jungle's signs. But tonight, something felt different. She could hear only her own breathing and the soft hum of her scanner. Somewhere ahead, her brother was being held by enemy scouts, and every second mattered. Far above, on a narrow ridge, Captain Jaren followed her from a distance, his human eyes, sharper than most believed, scanned the area for movement. He had been through jungles before, on different worlds, but this one felt hostile in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the enemy soldiers that worried him. It was the traps they had planted. Jaren knew these alien devices too well. One wrong step could mean shrapnel tearing through flesh. One mistake could end everything. Liara moved faster, her boots barely making a sound on the mossy ground. She did not see the thin layer of leaves covering the metallic plate beneath her. Sharon did. His eyes widened, his heart jumped. He shouted her name, his voice sharp and urgent. But she had already stepped forward. There was a click, soft but deadly. Jaren didn't think, he just moved. His body shot forward like a spear, muscles burning, armor scraping against the trees. In one motion, he slammed into Liara, shoving her to the side. The ground beneath the plate split open, and the trap activated. A burst of energy and shrapnel exploded upward, slicing through the air with a scream. Metal fragments tore into Jaren's armor, piercing through to his skin. The blast threw him off balance, and he hit the ground hard. Lyra's ears rang from the explosion. She scrambled up and turned to see Jaren lying on the ground, blood already staining the side of his uniform. Her heart froze. Why? She whispered, not understanding why a human would risk himself like that for her. Jaren pushed himself onto one elbow, breathing hard. You would have been dead, he said between shallow breaths. He tried to stand but winced as pain shot through his side. The jungle seemed to wake from its silence. From the distance came a low hum, enemy patrol drones. Scanning the area, Liara crouched beside Jaren, her mind racing. They had no time to stop. If the patrol found them here, the blast site would give them away instantly. She slipped one arm under Jaren's shoulder, helping him to his feet. He was heavier than she expected, but she refused to leave him behind. They stumbled forward into the thick undergrowth. Each step was slow. Every branch snapping underfoot felt too loud. The night air carried more sounds now, distant voices, the whir of engines, the mechanical clink of weapons. Jaren's breathing grew heavier, but he didn't complain. He had been through worse, he told himself. And if this was the price for saving her life, it was worth it. They found shelter in the hollow trunk of an ancient tree. The inside smelled of old sap and damp wood. It wasn't perfect cover, but it would hide them from the drones for now. Lyra pressed her ear to the outer bark. Listening, the enemy voices were getting closer. She could hear them calling her name, mocking, confident. They knew she was here. Jaren leaned against the inside wall, feeling the wetness of his own blood. His vision blurred for a moment, but he forced himself to stay awake. He saw the worry in Leora's eyes. Don't do anything stupid, he whispered with a half-smile. She almost laughed, but the sound of snapping branches outside silenced her. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. The shadows outside shifted. Lyra's hand went to the hilt of her plasma blade. Jaren reached for his sidearm. Despite the pain, neither of them spoke. Words would only give away their position. Then, from just beyond the hollow, a voice called out in the dark. It was a voice Liara knew all too well. Her blood ran cold. It was her brother, calling her name, his tone desperate, frightened. She started to move, but Jaren's hand gripped her arm. That's not him, Jaren said quietly, his eyes hard. There. Using him. As bait, Liara froze at Jaren's warning. The voice outside still called her name. Soft and broken, just like her brother's. Her chest ached to run out, to see him, to pull him into safety. But Jaren's grip was firm, his eyes cold with certainty. He had heard tricks like this before, on other battlefields, enemies using loved ones' voices to draw the target into the open. It was cruel, but effective. The sound of footsteps moved past the hollow tree, slow and heavy. Liara pressed herself against the damp inner wall, holding her breath. Jaren's free hand rested on his sidearm, his knuckles white. The patrol drones hummed overhead, their scanning lights sweeping through the foliage, one beam of pale blue. Light skimmed across the outside of the tree. Both of them stayed perfectly still until the light passed. When the danger faded for a moment, Jaren's body slumped slightly against her. She could feel the heat of his blood through his torn armor. "You're losing too much," she whispered. "I've lost worse." Jaren replied, but his voice was weaker now. Liara's mind raced. She had medical gel in her satchel. But it wouldn't be enough for a wound this deep. They needed to move, and fast. "Come on," she said, sliding his arm over her shoulder. Jaren grunted in pain as they slipped out from the hollow and into the undergrowth. The jungle floor was slick from earlier rain. Every step was a struggle for Jaren, and Liara could feel the weight of him pulling her down. The enemy voices faded for a moment, but she knew they were still close. They reached a narrow stream with water as dark as oil. Jaren motioned for her to stop. "Go through," he said. "The water will cover our trail." She helped him step into the icy current. It stung against his wounds, but he didn't flinch. They followed the stream until they reached a small clearing. The moonlight broke through the canopy, casting silver light over the mossy ground. Jaren sank to one knee, his breathing rough. Liara knelt beside him, pulling the med gel from her satchel. "This will burn," she warned. He smirked faintly. "I've been burned before." She pressed the gel into the torn flesh beneath. His armor. Jaren's jaw clenched, but he didn't make a sound while she worked. Jaren's gaze drifted toward the trees. Something moved in the shadows, fast, almost silent. He raised his weapon, but lowered it when the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a young alien male, his wrists bound, his face pale. Lyra's heart leaped her brother Kale, but before she could reach him, metallic clamp locked around his neck. From the shadows emerged two enemy scouts, weapons aimed directly at her. Jaren moved before Liara could. With his sidearm in one hand, he fired at the first scout. The shot hit true, dropping the alien instantly. The second scout raised his weapon, aiming at Liara. Jaren didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of her, taking the shot across his shoulder. Pain exploded through him, but he stayed upright long enough to fire back. The second scout collapsed, and the jungle fell silent again. Liara rushed to Kale. Breaking the collar with her blade, her brother clung to her, shaking. "You shouldn't be here." Kale whispered, "They'll all be coming now." Jaren's breathing grew heavier, his knees buckling. Liara caught him before he fell. "You can't keep doing this," she said sharply. "You'll die. Better me than you," he answered, his eyes locking with hers. They didn't have time to argue. The sound of engines roared in the distance, more enemy patrols. Liara glanced at Kale, then at Jaren. They couldn't fight their way out. Not with Jaren this injured. They needed a plan, something fast. Jaren's mind, even clouded with pain, worked through the possibilities. "I'll distract them," he said. "You get Kale to safety." "No," Liara snapped. "You won't survive." "Not the first time I've heard that," Jaren said with a faint grin. "And not the first time I've proved it wrong." The enemy voices grew louder. Jaren handed Liara his spare communicator. "Signal your people when you're far enough," he instructed. She gripped his hand tightly. "If you die, human, I will hate you forever." He chuckled softly. "Then I guess I'll have to stay alive." Jaren stepped into the moonlit clearing, limping but steady. His figure was a clear target against the silver light. Enemy scouts spotted him instantly. Shouts echoing through the trees. Liara pulled Kale into the shadows, her heart pounding. She didn't look back, because if she did, she might not have the strength to leave him there. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the sound of weapons. Fire cracked through the night. The humans' defiance echoed like thunder across the alien soil. And Liara knew he was buying them time with every drop of his blood. The jungle seemed to swallow Liara and Kale whole as they moved away from the gunfire. Every step felt heavier. Every rustle in the dark made Kale flinch. Liara kept her blade ready, her silver eyes scanning the shadows. Her heart was torn in. Two, one half pulling her forward to protect Kale, the other pulling her back toward Jaren. The echoes of weapons fire still rolled through the trees. Each shot a reminder that he was fighting alone. Kale stumbled over a root, nearly falling. Liara caught him, whispering for him to stay quiet. "We can't stop," she said softly. "If they find us here, it's over." Kale's face was pale under the faint moonlight. They said you wouldn't come," he murmured, his voice shaking. "They told me the jungle would take you." Liara tightened her grip on his arm. "They lied." A faint sound drifted through the darkness ahead. It wasn't the hum of drones, or the heavy step of soldiers. It was a voice, deep, calm, and painfully familiar. Liara froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was Jaren's voice. She could hear him speaking, though the words were too faint to understand. Kale looked up at her, confused. "How is he here?" The boy asked. "We left him behind." Lyra's instinct screamed that something was wrong. She pulled Kale behind the thick trunk of an ancient tree. The voice grew clearer. It wasn't just speaking now, it was calling her name. Her heart pounded. Jaren wouldn't be calling out in the middle of a firefight. And then she heard it. A faint metallic distortion beneath the words. It wasn't Jaren. It was a recording before she could react. A sharp beam of light cut through the dark. An enemy patrol had found them. Liara pushed Kale to the ground and rolled behind a fallen log as the first energy bolt sizzled past her head. She returned fire, her plasma blade igniting with a hiss. One scout charged forward, weapon raised. Liara ducked low, slashing across his armor, the blow sending him to the ground. But there were more, at least 3 moving through the trees. Closing in from different sides, Kale crawled toward her, fear in his wide eyes. "We're surrounded," he whispered. Lyra's mind raced. Running wasn't an option. They'd be shot before they took 3 steps. She needed chaos, noise, anything to break the patrol's rhythm. She grabbed a stun grenade from her belt, pulled the pin, and tossed it high into the air. The explosion of light and sound ripped through the clearing. Momentarily blinding the scouts, she grabbed Kale's hand. Dragging him toward a gap in the thick vines, they pushed through the vegetation. Emerging into a narrow ravine, the ground here was damp and uneven, dotted with glowing fungi. The faint glow lit Kale's frightened face. Liara crouched low, listening for pursuit. The shouts of the patrol grew distant, but she knew they wouldn't give up easily. Kale tugged on her arm. "We can't leave him," the boy said, his voice trembling. Liara looked away. Her chest tightened at the thought of Jaren still out there. She knew Kale was right. Jaren had saved them both, more than once. But going back now would be suicide. "We find a safe place first," she told him, then. "We go back." They followed the ravine until it narrowed into a cave-like opening. Inside, the air was cooler, and the sound of the jungle faded to a muffled hum. It wasn't perfect shelter, but it would hide them from the patrol for a while. Liara guided Kale to a flat rock and handed him her canteen. "Drink," she said. "You need your strength." Kale took a sip, then glanced toward the mouth of the cave. What if they catch him? He asked quietly. Liara didn't answer right away, in her mind. She saw Jaren standing in that moonlit clearing, bleeding but unshaken. She remembered the way he had looked at her. Not like an enemy, not like an alien, but like someone worth protecting. He won't let them, she said finally. He's too stubborn. A faint crackle came from the communicator Jaren had given her. She pulled it from her belt, pressing it to her ear. At first, there was only static. Then a voice broke through his voice, rough but alive. They're coming your way, he said. Keep moving. Don't stop. And don't look back. The signal cut off before she could reply. Liara stood, her resolve hardening. Jaren was still out there, fighting, bleeding, but alive. She wasn't going to waste the chance he had given them. She grabbed Kale's hand, again pulling him toward the cave's exit. This time there was no hesitation in her step. The jungle waited, and so did the battle they couldn't avoid. The jungle opened into a wider path, roots twisting like the bones of some ancient creature. Liara kept Kale close, moving fast but careful, her ears straining for every sound. The faint smell of burning metal drifted through the air, the scent of recent weapon fire. Somewhere behind them, Jaren was still holding the enemy's attention. But every moment they stayed alive came at his cost. Kale stumbled again, his small frame exhausted from running. Liara stopped just long enough to steady him. You can rest when we're safe, she whispered. Her words were firm, but inside, fear gnawed at her. She knew the enemy wouldn't stop until they had all three of them. And Jaren's strength was running out. A sharp crack of gunfire echoed from the west. It was followed by shouts, angry, desperate shouts in the enemies. Harsh language. Liara knew the meaning without needing a translation. Jaren was still fighting. But then another sound cut through the chaos. The high whine of a sniper rifle charging. Her stomach twisted. Snipers didn't miss. She glanced at Kale, then toward the sound. Her instincts screamed to keep moving, but her heart pulled her back. If that sniper had a clear shot at Jaren, it would be over in seconds. Without thinking, she pushed Kale into the shadow of a large root. Stay here, she ordered. Don't move until I come back. Kale's eyes widened. Where are you going? To keep him alive, she said, and vanished into the undergrowth. The jungle closed around her as she moved. Her steps were silent, her breaths controlled. Through the gaps in the leaves, she spotted the glint of a weapon barrel high in the branches. An enemy sniper lay prone, his scope trained toward a clearing below. She followed his line of sight and saw Jaren limping, his armor scorched, holding a pistol in one hand. He was drawing fire from half a dozen soldiers, each shot he took forcing them to duck for cover. But he never saw the sniper above. Liara's hand tightened around her plasma blade. She crept closer, stepping over vines and rotting wood. The sniper adjusted his aim. His finger curling around the trigger, Liara sprang forward, her blade cutting through the air. The enemy twisted at the last second, the shot going wide, missing Jaren by inches. But not missing entirely. The beam grazed Liara's side, heat burning through her armor and skin. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain. With one final slash, she took the sniper down, his weapon clattering to the jungle floor. Jaren's head turned toward the movement. He saw her, saw the blood, saw the way she was breathing through pain. His eyes narrowed, but there was no time for words. The soldiers closing in on him had noticed her too. Energy bolts ripped through the air as she dove for cover. Jaren moved toward her, firing at the soldiers even as his leg threatened to give out. They met in the shadow of a massive tree. What are you doing here? Jaren hissed. Stopping you from getting killed. Liara shot back. Her side ached. But adrenaline kept her moving. We can't fight them all, she said. Then we run. Jaren replied. He grabbed her arm. helping her keep pace as they pushed back toward Kale's hiding place. They broke through the foliage to find Kale right where she had left him. The boy's eyes went wide at the sight of Jaren, pale, bleeding, but still standing. "You came." "Back," Kale said to Liara, relief in his voice. She nodded. But the distant shouts reminded her that the moment wouldn't last. The three of them started moving again, heading deeper into the jungle. Behind them, the soldiers regrouped. They would follow. Liara knew it. Jaren knew it. Every step felt heavier. Every breath more labored. Jaren's injury slowed him, but he refused to stop. They reached a narrow gorge with water rushing at the bottom. A fallen tree formed a crude bridge slick with moss. Kale crossed first, arms spread for balance. Liara followed, wincing as her wound pulled. Jaren came last, each step careful. The moss slippery under his boots. Halfway across, the sound of gunfire erupted again. Splinters of wood burst around them, the enemy firing from the far bank. "Go!" Jaren shouted. Liara and Kale leaped to safety, turning to see Jaren return fire before crossing the last few steps when his boots hit solid ground. He nearly collapsed. Liara caught him, holding him upright. They had survived the sniper, but she could feel how close they were to losing him entirely. As they moved away from the gorge, Liara glanced back. The soldiers were already swarming the far bank. Jaren leaned on her for support, his breath ragged. "I told you not to come back for me," he said. "And I told you I don't take orders." "From humans," she replied, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. The jungle swallowed their voices as they disappeared into the night. But the enemy was not far behind, and the cost of survival was climbing with every step. The night air was heavy with mist. Every breath Liara took felt damp and cold against her throat. Her side burned where the sniper's shot had grazed her, but she kept moving. Kale stayed just ahead, his small frame slipping easily between the thick jungle roots. Jaren followed close, his steps uneven, his face pale in the faint moonlight. They had been moving for over an hour since crossing the gorge. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but none of them believed the enemy had given up. The jungle was too quiet now, the kind of silence that meant danger was waiting. Liara's instincts told her they were being watched, not just by soldiers, but by the jungle's predators. Kale stopped suddenly, pointing at a fallen log covered in glowing moss. "This way," he whispered. "There's a safe path, but it's near the enemy camp." Liara exchanged a glance with Jaren. The human's jaw tightened. "If it gets us out of here faster, we take it," he said. Though his voice was strained, she could see the sweat on his brow. The way his hand pressed against his side to keep the bleeding in check, he was running out of time, and they all knew it. They moved into the narrow trail Kale had found. The ground dipped and rose, the air thick with the smell of wet leaves. Every now and then, they could see faint orange light ahead, campfires from the enemy camp. The path curved dangerously close, forcing them to crouch low and move in silence. Jaren's breath came in short bursts. Liara reached back, offering her hand for balance. He took it without a word. A sudden rustle from the trees above made them freeze. Two glowing yellow eyes stared down at them from the darkness. A low growl rumbled through the air. Liara recognized the sound. A jungle hunter, massive and deadly. It leaped from the branches, its black fur bristling, claws slicing through the air. Kale screamed, ducking behind a root. Liara drew her plasma blade, stepping between the predator and her brother. The beast lunged, its jaws snapping. Liara swung the blade upward, the heat searing through its fur. It yelped but didn't stop, circling them with predatory patience. Jaren, despite his injuries, raised his pistol and fired. The shot struck the beast in the shoulder, slowing it. Liara seized the moment. Driving her blade into its chest, the creature roared and collapsed into the ferns. the smell of scorched fur filling the air. "Move," Jaren said, his voice low. But urgent, the sound of the fight had carried the enemy would have heard it. They ran again, this time faster, Kale leading them through twisting paths. The glow of the campfires faded, replaced by the distant whir of drones. They were almost at the end of the trail when Jaren stumbled. Liara caught him just before he hit the ground. His skin felt cold, his eyes unfocused. "You need a medic now," she said sharply. He shook his head. "Not yet. Get Kale to safety first." Kale pointed ahead. "There's a ravine with a hidden entrance. My people used it during the war." They pushed on, each step for Jaren slower than the last. When they reached the ravine, Kale scrambled down first. Liara followed, guiding Jaren carefully down the slick slope. The entrance was covered by hanging vines, almost invisible unless you knew it was there. Inside, it was dark, damp, and cool. A temporary shelter. Kale lit a small gloss stick, casting pale green light over the rock walls. Liara lowered Jaren. Onto a flat stone, she tore open a second packet of medgel. Pressing it to his wound, he flinched, but didn't pull away. "You saved me more than once tonight," she said quietly. "That's what teammates do," Jaren replied, though his voice was barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if he believed that, or if it was just something humans said to make pain feel smaller. They sat in silence for a moment. The jungle outside seemed to breathe, its sounds growing louder again. But beneath the familiar noises, Liara heard something else. Boots, moving in formation. The enemy was close. Kale's eyes went wide. They found the trail. Liara tightened her grip on her blade. They couldn't stay here much longer. And with Jaren in this condition, their next move had to be perfect. The sound of voices drifted through the vines. She recognized the commander's tone, the same alien who had captured Kale. Liara's pulse quickened. They had minutes, maybe seconds. Before the soldiers broke through, she looked at Jaren, his eyes half closed. His breathing shallow. Kale stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear in his face. "I know another way," he said, "but it will take us past the cliffs." Liara didn't hesitate. "Then we go," she said. They pulled Jaren to his feet, supporting him between them. The vines parted, and the three of them stepped into the dark once more. The enemy's voices grew sharper behind them. Every step was harder than the last, but in this jungle, stopping meant dying. The night sky was hidden under thick clouds. The jungle felt darker than before, as if the trees themselves wanted to trap them. Liara and Kale moved quickly, each of them holding one of Jaren's arms, guiding him forward. His weight was heavy, his steps unsteady, but he refused to stop. Behind them, the enemy voices were growing louder. The metallic clink of weapons echoed in the misty air. Kale led them through a narrow path between two massive boulders. The stone walls on each side were slick with moss. The space was so tight that Liara had to turn slightly to fit through. Jaren's boots scraped against the rock, sending small pebbles tumbling somewhere in the distance. A long, low howl rose into the night. It was not the sound of soldiers. It was something else. Something hunting. Liara knew that call. It belonged to the jungle's largest predator, the Night Stalker, a creature so fast and silent that most never saw it coming. Kale froze when he heard it. "We have to move faster," he whispered. But speeding up was not possible with Jaren barely on his feet. The path opened into a clearing lit faintly by glowing plants. The air here felt colder. The sound of the Night Stalker's growl rolled through the trees. Closer now, Liara's grip on her plasma blade tightened. She had fought one before, but never while protecting two others and running from an enemy at the same time. Jaren's head lifted slightly, his eyes scanning the tree line. He heard it. To the soft crunch of leaves, the shift of branches overhead. "It's tracking us," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Liara glanced at Kale. "Stay close to me," she told him. "No matter what happens, a sudden blur of movement." Shot from the shadows, the Night Stalker landed in the clearing, its black fur rippling, muscles tensed. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, locking onto them. It lowered its head, teeth bared, tail swaying in slow anticipation. The enemy was still coming from behind, but this beast was ready to strike now. Liara stepped forward, placing herself between the predator and the others. Her blade hummed as she activated it. The blue light reflecting in the creature's eyes, the Night Stalker growled. Circling, testing her movements, Kale stayed behind Jaren. Clutching a small dagger he barely knew how to use, Jaren, despite the pain, lifted his pistol, aiming carefully. The creature lunged, a blur of speed. Liara swung her blade upward, sparks flying as it met the beast's claw. Jaren fired twice, one shot grazing its flank, the other hitting its shoulder. The predator snarled in fury, retreating a few steps before circling again. This time it leaped for Jaren, sensing weakness. Liara moved without thinking, slamming her blade into its side. The creature roared, twisting violently, its tail lashed out, striking Liara and knocking her to the ground. Kale cried out, but Jaren pulled him back. Firing again, the shots drove the creature into the shadows, but its growls still echoed nearby. It wasn't gone, just waiting for another chance. "We can't fight it, and the soldiers," Jaren said, breathing heavily. "Then we keep moving," Liara replied, forcing herself to her feet. She grabbed Jaren's arm again. Pulling him forward, Kale led them toward the far edge of the clearing. Where the ground sloped upward into thick vines, they climbed. The earth damp beneath their hands. The growl came again, closer than before. The predator was following them, just out of sight. The slope led them to a ridge where they could see faint lights in the distance, the rescue beacon Jaren had mentioned. It flickered like a star through the mist. "That's it," Kale whispered, hope flickering in his eyes. But between them and that beacon lay more jungle, and somewhere in that darkness, both the enemy and the Night Stalker waited. A sudden snap of branches behind them made Liara spin around. Two enemy scouts emerged from the foliage, weapons raised before they could fire. The Night Stalker struck not at them, but at the soldiers. It tore through the first scout with terrifying speed. The second barely had time to scream before it dragged him into the shadows. The jungle fell silent again, except for the sound of wet tearing in the distance. Liara didn't wait to see more. "Go now," she urged. They pushed forward through the last stretch of trees. The beacon's glow grew brighter. Jaren's legs shook, his steps faltering. But he kept his eyes on the light. Kale stayed at his side, urging him on. Liara glanced back once the Night Stalker stood at the edge of the trees. Its eyes still on her, but it didn't follow. For now, the jungle had claimed enough prey. The hum of engines reached them, human dropships approaching. Lyra's chest tightened with relief. They had survived the beast, but the danger wasn't over yet. The enemy was still coming, and they would have only moments to reach safety. The rescue beacon's glow cut through the mist like a promise. It was close now. Close enough that Liara could almost believe they were going to make it. But the jungle did not release its prey so easily. Behind them, the sound of boots pounding against wet soil grew louder. The enemy had found their trail again, and this time they were not far. Jaren's steps grew heavier, his breath ragged. Blood still seeped through the torn armor at his side. Leaving dark stains on the jungle floor, Liara could feel his weight pressing against her as she helped him forward. Kale was at his other side, trying to keep his pace steady. The roar of the dropship engines was growing stronger. But so was the shouting of the soldiers. They broke through the last wall of trees and found themselves on open ground. Ahead was a small plateau where the beacon pulsed, surrounded by scattered rocks. Beyond that, the dropships hovered, their floodlights sweeping the clearing. Human soldiers were already running toward them, weapons ready, but the enemy was almost at their backs. "Go!" Jaren gasped, his voice low but firm. Liara shook her head. "We go together, there's no time," he said, forcing a weak smile. "They need you more than me." Before she could answer, the first wave of enemy fire streaked past them. Striking the rocks, Liara pulled him down. Shielding him with her body, Kale crouched low. Clutching the small dagger he had carried all night, the human soldiers returned fire, pushing forward to meet them, but the enemy was determined. They were faster, and they had numbers. One soldier fell. Then another. Jaren gritted his teeth, pushing himself to his feet despite Liara's protests. He raised his pistol and began firing into the advancing line. Every shot he took drew the enemy's attention toward him, buying precious seconds. "Get Kale to the ship," he said, without looking at her. Liara's heart twisted. She wanted to argue, but deep down she knew he was right. If they hesitated now, they would all be cut down before reaching safety. She grabbed Kale's hand and pulled him toward the beacon. The boy resisted for a moment, his eyes darting back to Jaren. "He's not coming?" Kale asked, his voice breaking. Liara didn't answer. She just kept pulling him forward. The ground shook as the dropship descended lower. Wind whipped through the clearing. Carrying the sharp smell of fuel and metal, the human soldiers closed ranks, firing over Liara and Kale as they ran. She pushed Kale toward the open ramp, shouting for him to get inside. The boy obeyed, disappearing into the ship's safety. Only then did she turn back. Jaren was still standing, still firing. But his movements were slowing. The enemy was closing in. Their weapons blazing in the dim light. Without thinking, Liara sprinted back toward him. She reached him just as his pistol clicked empty. Her blade flashed, cutting down the nearest soldier who had dared to get close. "You're not dying here," she said fiercely. His faint smirk returned. "Didn't I tell you?" Worth every pain. Together they staggered toward the ship. A human soldier broke from the line to cover them, laying down suppressing fire. Energy bolts ripped through the air, scorching the ground around them. One struck close enough to knock Liara off balance. Jaren caught her, even in his weakened state. They stumbled the last few meters. The ramp now only steps away. Strong hands grabbed them, pulling them aboard. The moment their feet were on the deck, the ramp began to close. Through the narrowing gap, Liara saw the enemy still charging. But then the dropship lifted, engines roaring as the jungle fell away beneath them. The battle on the ground faded into the distance. Only the pounding of her heart remained. In the medbay, Jaren collapsed onto a stretcher. A human medic moved quickly. Cutting away the damaged armor, Liara stood nearby, her hands clenched into fists. Kale appeared at her side, his eyes wet but determined. "Will he live?" he asked quietly. The medic glanced up. "If he keeps that stubborn will of his." Yes, Jaren's eyes opened slightly. Finding Liara, she stepped closer, leaning down so he could hear her over the noise of the engines. "You risked everything," she said softly. "Why?" His lips curved into a tired smile. "Because some people," he whispered, "are worth the pain. Even if they don't believe it." His eyes closed again, but his breathing was steadier. Liara sat beside him, watching the jungle shrink into the night below. The war wasn't over, and danger would find them again. But for now, they had survived, and in her heart, she knew the truth. Jaren had taken the trap, the bullets, and the fight for one reason alone. And he had done it without regret.